Hello there. Today I'd like to talk about sigils, making sigils, what I mean when I use the word sigil, as well as when, why, and how to make one. So to begin with, because a lot of people hear the word, but they may not really know what it means, I like to think of a sigil as a self-made logo of success. And that doesn't really sound that far off from a regular logo, does it? What do logos seek to accomplish? Well, a company, usually, has something in mind. They have an intention. Most of the time, they want your money. Bottom line, they want your money. So, among other things, designed to get that money from you, they'll design a logo, which represents not only their product, but your need for it. So every time you come across it, you may not find yourself thinking automatically, I need that, but you will think about the product. It gets in your mind, and you may find yourself fighting off a sudden want or a perceived need for that product. So they really just have to put the symbol out there. It carries the meaning, and then they get to sit back and watch or do other things while it goes out and does its work, and you may or may not follow through, but it gets something done a lot of the time. Name recognition at the very least. So sigil works much in the same way, except you design it with your intention, and you basically know that you've done this process to yourself. So why would you want to make a sigil? Well, we've already discussed that it carries the meaning of an intention. So you want to accomplish something. And this really could lead to a much broader question. Why practice any form of magic? We want to change something. We usually want to change something to get a result in connection with our own will. We wouldn't practice magic if we didn't have some intention, if we didn't have some desire to change something that we didn't think we could do more easily some other way. This really falls in line with a well-quoted thought by Aleister Crowley. Think what you want of him. You may love him, you may hate him, you may have no feelings whatsoever. Think what you want of him. But he did have a really nice, concise, and direct way of defining magic. He called it the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So that sums up what we want to do when we create one of these sigils. If you don't want something to happen, or you don't have something in mind, don't do this stuff. At least don't do it until you've got those things more clearly defined for yourself. Which leads into the when, very nicely. When should you make a sigil? Well, again, when you have an intention to start with. In my experience, though, as far as in the stream of time, you want to do it far enough ahead of something for your sigil to create a bit of momentum. You want to do it ahead of time. The further ahead, the better. Now, I first learned about sigils through a series of lectures on chaos magic. I really like chaos magic. It gets into the mechanics, the breakdown of why magic works. So if you haven't read up on that, I suggest it. But I first learned about them in some courses on chaos magic when the lecturer presented a discussion on quantum research. Now, early quantum research demonstrated that conscious beings, like yourselves and like myself, can and do affect the tiniest parts of reality. Now, the man who put those lectures on shared a fantastic video for people like myself and presumably many of you who don't have a background in chaos or in quantum physics and quantum research and quantum theory. And this video explained that aspect of quantum research, the parts that indicated that you and I have the ability to change reality in even its smallest parts. So I've posted a link to that video below, and you'll want to check that out. It really puts it into a nice perspective and easily understandable, and explains just for folks who have no knowledge about it whatsoever. So take a look at that. Now, we have the ability to change and manipulate the teeny parts, but if we want to adjust the bigger parts of reality, we can. But we need time to build the momentum, as I said before, of the intentions to create a domino effect. So for best results, you'll want to start early on. Now, how? The big question now. We know that we want to create this logo of our success that'll basically bypass, and we'll get into some of this explanation later on, and probably in the next video. But think of it as just the logo that gets your intentions moving. It gets them past the critical part of the mind that will basically talk you out of success. We know why, because we want to succeed. We know when we have an intention, and as far ahead as necessary. Don't do a sigil for a job interview the night before. You probably did not find out that you have an interview coming up tomorrow. Right, a few hours before the institution closes. They don't call you up. They give you time. Do the sigil ahead of time. It works better that way. So now what about how? How do we make one of these things anyway? Well, first, you have to establish your intent. At the very least, it can waste time if you don't have an intention clearly in mind. And at worst, it can prove dangerous. So have one, have it clearly defined. Think about it. You don't have to have the intention and then create the sigil 5 minutes later. Think about it for a few hours. Think about it for a few days or a week. Get what you want clearly in mind and in focus. And make sure that you work with an attainable intention. You won't levitate. You won't shoot lightning from your hands. And you probably won't find a way to breathe fire. So, if you have those as your intention, a sigil will it definitely won't help. Think of something a bit more realistic and attainable. And really, for your first few attempts, you'll probably want to work with intentions that don't hold tremendous significance for you, or ones that will easily come to pass. So not ones of huge importance, not hugely important intentions, and ones that you wouldn't have to struggle too much to have come to pass. For instance, finding $5, finding a lost object, bumping into someone that you you have wanted to talk to, getting contacted by someone that you haven't heard from regularly in a very long time. Those kinds of things. And presuming that the person that you want to bump into or that you'd like to speak with has not died. You know, again, in that realistic, attainable part of reality. Now you'll see here, I have an intention. I want to have $13,000 in savings by the end of 2019. Now, for me, it seems fairly attainable. Not really easy, but attainable. It's possible within the realm of reality. I did not say I want to have $1 million in savings by the end of 2019 because I can't fathom that happening for any reason, short of my death and an insurance payout, and then it really won't matter anyway. Not for me anyway. So, second, make the statement one that already implies success. We do a whole lot in our minds. And if we eliminate certain words from our intention, we remove doubt. Words like hope and want tend to imply doubt, and doubt kicks in that critical thinking. Not that we should object to critical thinking. That overly critical part of the mind that wants to find any reason that things will fail. I like to think of that part of my mind as the Apepian part of my mind. Apep, in Egyptian lore, wanted to stop the progress of the sun. He figured in as a stagnant being, a being that wanted stasis and no progress. And that part of your mind, the one that says, this won't work, so why bother trying anyway, wants that. So, if we can eliminate hope and want and words like it that kind of give us that inherent excuse for failure. Well, I want it to happen, but if it doesn't, then maybe it would have been for the best. Nothing wrong with positive thinking, but we don't want to sabotage and betray our own success. It makes me think of prayer, honestly. Prayer, if you think about it, works a lot like sigils. We put an intention out there. We let things do what they'll do. And it should work out. But what does any good prayer have at the end? Not my will, but thy will. An inherent, built-in fail-safe that reminds us that if this fails, if this doesn't work, then okay. I shouldn't have wanted it anyway. Well, magic doesn't work that way, and the left-hand path doesn't work that way. The left-hand path works on a my will, not thy will basis. So, throw out those little safety nets and work toward your success, your assured success. You'll see here in my example, not anymore I hope or I want to, but I have $13,000 in savings by the end of this year. We have some certainty there, don't we? So, the third step, I always like to add no harm to the end of the written intention. So I've gotten it out there, I've defined it, I've made it more certain, but I throw in a no harm at the end because I don't want to cause harm, normally. And because you probably don't want to cause harm to yourself or to someone else in attaining your intention, and magic tends to work like lightning. It'll take the path of least resistance. build in a safeguard, not against failure, because we won't have that, but against unintended and unneeded harm. Remember how I said earlier, not having things clearly defined can prove dangerous? Not having safety mechanisms built into this program of the sigil can also prove dangerous and harmful, not only to others, but to yourself. Remember what I said about the $1 million idea. Well, if I didn't have a no harm in there, I might get hit by a bus. I got my $1 million. I just can't use it, or I have to pay off medical bills with it, right? So, build that in there. Now, in the event that for some reason you want to use a sigil to cause harm to someone, and this has been your express purpose, obviously, a general no harm won't do the trick, but you'll still want to build in some kind of protective measure toward those that you don't want to cause harm to, like yourself. So you may need to elaborate a bit more on that no harm to anyone else, that kind of thing, because you may want to get rid of that schmuck. But a car accident that could result might hurt, and probably would hurt in some way or another, people who don't deserve it. So make it very specific. And for the record, I don't advocate using magic to harm other people. Maybe I'll do a video on magical ethics at some point, but I find it far more useful to work magic to change things in myself that will help me to overcome obstacles that others can throw in my way. That makes me a better person overall, and I can use that going forward in the future. So, not trying to promote harmful uses of magic when, generally speaking, you can use them more constructively for yourself. That said, having written the intention down, you want to remove all the vowels and redundant consonants, and symbols, in the case of some numbers, for instance, or punctuation, if you want to include those. And you'll see that I've done that here as well. Now remember when I said that conscious beings like you and I influence reality through that consciousness, through our consciousness. We can affect reality in ways that support our intentions, but we can also betray our desires as well. I mentioned that. If we just keep the intention in mind, that self-sabotaging part of the mind will betray our intentions and will give up, or things will get affected differently than we want to. So, by breaking down the language of the intention and performing the next step that we'll talk about, we can get past that part and get the mind to focus on the symbol of the intention and its success. So, step 5, we combine the remaining letters and numbers and or symbols into the language of the subconscious or unconscious mind. Symbolic. Into a representation that does not outwardly seem to represent the original intention. Now, I'll show you how I do this. The other steps I already had prepared, but we'll actually do this redesigning right now. So you can see here the leftover characters and symbols from the sigil, from the statement rather. And now we just want to combine them. So I start out on not the fanciest paper, because sometimes you got to go through several drafts. We probably will on this. And we just set about combining the symbols. Now, you'll also note that sometimes we can double up. So for instance, you'll see that we have an N and an M here, right? So right there we've got kind of the N, and we can come down and we've got the M as well. So we can kill two birds, right? And don't consider it an exact science. Like here, now we've got the D, and if we kind of think about it this way, we've got the H. Oh, I had doubled up the H's there. My mistake. Get that. 0. This looks a little bit like a 3, doesn't it? And this easily becomes a 1. And if we look here, this looks like an S. We can throw a couple of dollar signs in there and get rid of those too. If we get imaginative now, we've taken care of our B, our F, and this here reminds me of an R. So there we go. Now let's revise that, because that looks real sloppy, kind of hard to remember, doesn't it? And you can eliminate entire parts of this, okay? You don't have to keep all of it around, okay? Like that there, that looked a little sloppy as well. So we can mix and match and turn it into kind of an artsy project, something we can enjoy a little bit. I'll draw it out one more time. I liked it facing that way before. I think that'll do it. So like I said, not an exact science. It doesn't have to look real dandy. You can go through as many reiterations as you want and as you need to for you to get it trimmed down to something that you can easily visualize and focus on, and that doesn't have too much going on there. You see that if you close your eyes, if you end up using this in a meditative situation, for instance, one of these will prove harder to work with than the other. So we've gotten through the 5 steps. I'll just put this on some nicer, heavier paper, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so I actually did a little more refining on the design. I think this simplifies it a bit and makes it even more direct and visually pleasing. So we've gone through and we've done the 5 steps. We've performed the 5 steps for making a sigil. We've established the intention. We've refined the intention. We've made sure to not harm anyone by the intention. We've eliminated the vowels and redundant consonants, and we've gone ahead and combined all the remaining stuff into a new symbol that does not remind us of the original intention. And if you want to just look here, I said it doesn't really remind you at all of the original intention, now does it? And that'll prove very useful and helpful, as we'll discuss in the next video regarding the application or the use of the sigil itself. Because you may ask, rightly so at this point, okay, well, I have it, but now what do I do with it? We'll get into that in the next video, where we'll discuss the final 3 steps in sigil work. So until next time, think about your intentions. Take your time. I expect that the next video will get posted in a week or 2, and we'll go from there. I look forward to that. Please feel free to leave any and all thoughts, comments, and questions below. I like discussion, and I enjoy engaging with folks. So please feel free and encouraged. Subscribe so you'll get regular updates, and make sure to follow me on the social media links, which you'll also see below. Until next time, keep transforming.